come to you. So how do you see the impact? We'll come back in relation to how that's going to happen, but how do you see the impact as a young community activist?
So as a young person, I mean, when I was growing up, I attended Bangla classes. I don't think I understood the value of it and appreciated the value of those classes until I was older. So by the time I got to university, or when I was applying to university, I looked at my GCSE results, I looked at my grades, and I thought to myself, well, actually, it gave me a boost in my education. So that was really helpful. And it also, one of the things that it did was, as a young person growing up with two identities, somebody who is British and also Bangladeshi, it helped me navigate through society, understand myself and my place in society. And one of the things I'd say it does for young people is it equips them for the real world. So in the mainstream education system, we're not being taught about our Bangla identity, we're not being taught about different cultures necessarily. We're taught about world history, but what the supplementary schools did, not only just taught mother tongue, but also taught us about our history, a heritage. And that's the gap that it filled, that it was not possible for me to access that in my school.
Do you see this issue, I mean, community language, because you say that, you were actually, you had the benefit of, attending Bangladeshi, Bengali language classes, and you see yourself at a much empowered, much enhanced young person at this moment, more established, and you see yourself, there is no dilemma between the two identity you carry. So do you actually see this as just a community language access that you had, or you feel that this opportunity actually helped you to understand your heritage better, and you have now, and there is no a conflict now, there is no confusion, you see yourself as a much enhanced, much enlightened young person? How do you see your identity?
I would definitely say yes, because I think one of the things that it did was it made me very confident about my heritage. And when it came to, for example, going to university and then entering the job market, I was more aware of, for example, discrimination or barriers to employment on the basis of my background. So, and I've now worked in higher education, and I can see that, it's true, there is a lot of job discrimination that still exists. There's a lot of discrimination that exists before we even get to higher education level. So it's already happening at an early stage, and the barriers are there from an early age for a lot of people. And then by the time they get to higher education, I mean, they're already competing for places that it's going to be very, very hard to reach.
Do you believe that fighting or kind of addressing this kind of discrimination, having a strong heritage, having a strong kind of bonding with your real heritage will help?
Yes, because it makes you able to stand up for yourself in those environments where you're entering the mainstream community, and you're navigating a place where you may be in a higher education, in your university, in your course, you may be the only Bangladeshi, you may be the only person of your ethnic background, you may be the only person of your age. So definitely that gives you the confidence, that early upbringing of having those lessons.
So do you think on 20th, people, young people who had the same opportunity, who are now in higher education or in a good or an established business, established position, profession, they will also come, and should they come?
They definitely should come, and I think, if people join the dots and can connect back to the successes that they've had, they will realise that those lessons, those supplementary classes did help towards their journey. So I think I would say that the mainstream education systems, as mentioned earlier, I think the gap that was that it didn't necessarily teach us about our cultural heritage. But by the time I, for example, got to university, I realised that actually the curriculum is very Eurocentric. So it didn't focus on the happenings of countries outside of Europe, and that access I only got at an early age to really understand my country, my motherland, my mother tongue. So I hope that a lot of young people will join.
Thank you. As a community activist, we know that in Town Hamlets Council there are 48 councillors, and out of that 24 are Bangladeshi heritage councillors. So do you think that they actually had the benefit of this community language services?
So I mean, many of them.
If they had, how is it that they are not recognizing the need?
I think many of them may have. I don't know obviously about every single individual councillor and whether they benefited from the classes, but many of them may have had, and all of them were invited to the public meeting as far as I'm aware, and some of them did come and some of them did listen to the concerns, and some of them expressed support for the campaign as well. So we're obviously still talking to the councillors and lobbying them, and we're hopefully expecting them to continue on speaking on behalf of the residents. What I did want to pick up on earlier as well, though, when you spoke about self-financing, I mean, what we have to think about is when we're talking about self-financing, we're talking about the economics, we're talking about affordability, and I think that's what is not being talked about enough. Then that if people can pay for Arabic classes, if people can pay for other classes, then why can they not pay for Bangla classes or language classes? But the problem is this: when the first generation, second generations arrive, not just Bangladesh community but other communities that have come, we had representation in the public meeting from Mandarin, Chinese community, Vietnamese community as well. But they had to make a lot of sacrifices economically to make that happen. Tara settle oida, tara nizoro, but tara sacrifices tara nizeo sinda korsen shoptar for education invest kortam. So tara ita struggle koriya korsoin. Okon the situation of forsi amra the highest child poverty rate in the whole of the country, highest worklessness rate in the whole of London. So now to the amra to the councillors of the coins did that Bangla classes or supplementary classes or nizeo self finance korta the economically family ita kila how are they going to deliver on that? It is going to be very, very unaffordable. We've got universal credit, food banks. Wanagula is rising in this country, and is most affected is places like Hamlets, which is already very deprived. So it's going to be very, very hard to sustain that.
What is exactly is been meant by remodeling?
Remodeling, the definition of it is essentially changing, something, but not really closing it or not really changing it in a way that
is there a valid reason for remodeling? Because this position talks about some of the projects that are not well attended. So what does that mean?
I don't think the proposal is really to remodel, because I mean that after a campaign asil, which was to save the public nurseries. The proposal was to re-provide, but essentially it was the same thing year on year cut. First asil privatization, and which was to look at other sources of income or revenue, and the thing that happened after that was re-provide horta, but essentially it was proposing cuts. So re-providing that are about remodeling that are community language services. The plan is the first 30,000 cut horbo 30,000 cut horat fore. What's going to happen is the service will get run down. Internally, the service is not going to be able to perform very, very well, because is going to affect the resources, the way that it performs. But there was 250,000 pounds, 350,000. But there was 250,000 pounds. So how is the service going to perform well? And then what's going to happen? I can guarantee you this: it's going to be a case to make foreclosure or to justify the self-financing. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. What's going to happen is you're going to have the service run down internally. The service is not going to function. Of course, it's not going to function if it doesn't have the funding. So year-on-year cuts.
So how are the parents reacting to this?
Well, obviously, very, very anxious, and this is not just going to affect students,
because
parents.
they've got a strong voice. They're the constituents of this.
And they want to have their voices heard, and that's why there is a campaign that is active. And many parents attended the public meeting. It's a shame that the consultation hasn't really happened. You're talking about 47 organisations that haven't really been properly consulted, and I guess it's true that when it comes to the general budget, there doesn't need to be legally be a consultation. But there's also, there's nothing to say that there can't be a legally cannot be a consultation. If there is a political will, it can happen, and you can make it happen. But it's whether the political will is there or not to really meaningfully consult with members of the public, with the organisations that are involved. So far, I can't see that is there.
Do you see the future of or involvement of actually new generation British Bangladeshis in this kind of demonstration, or in this kind of our future, protecting our future, protecting our heritage? Do you think that the young generation, new generation British Bangladeshis will feel part of this journey?
I think what's happening is that a lot of people who have benefited through the mainstream education system are also realizing that, you know what, I get my qualifications, but I'm still struggling to, you know, be treated the same.
As Murtaza was saying that we saw that level of passion from the leaders who fought for this kind of issues in the past. So are we actually saying that we don't see that level of passion from new generation British Bangladeshis to fight for this kind of real kind of issues that is close to our heart?
I think the situation definitely has changed. So where our elders fought racism on the streets, they faced violence. Maybe we're not experiencing the same in that way. We're experiencing racism in more subtle forms. You know, unconscious bias. You know, when you go to an interview, you may get turned down because of the way you look. You know, you have discrimination that happens when you apply for jobs, for example, you know, just on the basis of your name. But people are waking up to this. And the thing is, with what's happening in society, where the most ethnically diverse groups, the people who, you know, are working class, those groups are experiencing, you know, the hardest effects of what the government's agenda is. So it is actually a catalyst to inspire people to actually do something. So one of the things that is happening actually,
so this issue could be a catalyst for change.
Is that everyone should write to their local councillors, not just their local councillors, but all the councillors. Write to them and express, you know, that you don't want this to go ahead, and what are they going to do about it. So it's important to continue that dialogue right up to the 20th.
But how good are we, or how effective are we as Bangladeshis to write to our councillors in that kind of activities? Do you think that we'll be able to do that?
Well, a lot of people turned up in the public meeting, and a lot of people signed the petition. So, and
I think that's a much more effective process for us. Yeah.
So signing the petition, contacting the local councillors, asking them, you know, what is your position on this? You know, are you going to, you know, help save the service? And, you know, getting the voices heard is very, very important. And obviously, you know, come along on the 20th. When the final decision is going to be made.
Are you expecting parents to come forward and
definitely
play a strong role?
A huge role.
What
for
are you
parents.
expecting parents to do?
Parents and anybody that, you know, like me, benefited from the service, from Bangla classes, to come along as well. So younger and older, both generations, to definitely come.
Okay.